Cleveland Brown fans, man, they're going crazy, man, in the city of Cleveland, man, after the Cleveland Browns dropped their season opener to the Cincinnati Bengals 17-16. And there's a lot of fans showing their frustration with Kevin Stefanski and Joe Flacco. Now, we all see what unfolded. We all see what unfolded in that game. And it seems like Cleveland Browns can't get out their own way as an organization.
The Browns find themselves at a breaking point with head coach Kevin Stefanski suddenly at the center of controversy after reported altercations involving rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders. What began as a promising season of transition is now clouded by whispers that ownership is preparing to make a drastic change on the sideline. With Sanders generating both massive attention and internal friction, Stefanski's ability to control the locker room has been called into question. The question now isn't just about winning games, but whether Cleveland can afford to keep a coach whose authority is slipping in real time. TV ratings spiked 27% the moment Shedeur Sanders took the field in his first nationally televised preseason game, a surge that instantly reframed the Browns' season as more than just another rebuild. That kind of audience jump doesn't just represent casual curiosity, it shows how one player can completely shift the economics of a franchise. But in Cleveland, the excitement surrounding Sanders has been undercut by sideline tension with head coach Kevin Stefanski, whose once steady leadership now looks increasingly brittle. Reports of heated exchanges during practice and visible frustration spilling over on the field have fueled speculation that the organization may be ready to move on from a coach who just 2 years ago was praised for bringing stability. The issue isn't only about personality clashes, it's about whether Stefanski can manage the high-pressure ecosystem that Sanders creates every time he touches the ball. On the surface, Stefanski's track record should buy him more time. He delivered the Browns' first playoff victory in 26 years back in 2020, finishing that season 11-5 and looking like the long-awaited answer to decades of coaching turmoil. Yet since then, Cleveland has regressed in key areas. The team's win total slipped, divisional rivals like Baltimore and Cincinnati surged ahead, and despite an expensive roster overhaul, the offense has remained erratic. In 2023, the Browns' offense ranked just 18th in scoring and 23rd in passing yards per game, a disappointing outcome given the talent invested on the line and at skill positions. Now, with Sanders generating unprecedented interest, ownership expects not just competitiveness, but also polish and control, things Stefanski appears to be losing with each altercation. Ticket sales provide another data point in this mounting pressure. When Sanders was announced as a starter in preseason, the Browns sold an additional 4,800 tickets in less than 48 hours, pushing a typical August game into near sellout territory. Secondary market prices doubled from $65 to well over $130 for seats that normally barely crack face value. But once word spread about practice scuffles and Sanders briefly being pulled from first-team reps, demand cooled. StubHub data showed resale prices dipping back to the $70 range, erasing much of the initial surge. That kind of volatility isn't just about football, it's about consumer confidence. And right now, fans are questioning whether Stefanski's leadership can maximize their investment in Sanders. Inside the locker room, the dynamic has shifted sharply. Veteran players who once praised Stefanski's calm, measured approach now seem less convinced. Anonymous quotes filtering into the media have hinted that certain leaders feel Sanders isn't being properly managed, that his fiery personality is clashing with a coach better suited to quieter quarterbacks. Unlike a rookie such as Patrick Mahomes, who spent a year learning under Alex Smith and Andy Reid, Sanders has been thrust into immediate spotlight with every snap scrutinized. That creates a volatile environment where altercations aren't just brushed aside, they're magnified, debated, and linked directly to Stefanski's job security. National perception is another critical piece. The Browns, typically a regional draw, suddenly became a headline team on ESPN and Fox Sports the moment Sanders entered the building. Preseason coverage segments featuring Cleveland jumped from 3 minutes of airtime on average to over 10 minutes, according to Nielsen tracking of sports broadcasts. But that spotlight cuts both ways. When Sanders had his sideline argument with Stefanski, the clip was replayed across platforms, drawing millions of views on social media within 24 hours. That kind of exposure intensifies ownership pressure. They're not just watching football, They're watching brand management, and right now, Stefanski is struggling to keep control of the narrative. Complicating matters further is the Browns' financial picture. Merchandise reports show Sanders' jersey outselling every other player on the roster by a margin of 4-1 in his first 2 weeks. In fact, his debut jersey launch ranked third league-wide behind only Mahomes and Jalen Hurts for that period. That surge represents millions in new revenue for Cleveland, but the risk is clear. If altercations with Stefanski lead to benchings, reduced snaps, or internal drama, those numbers could plummet just as quickly as they rose. Sportsbooks have already noticed instability. Browns-related prop bets dropped 42% the week. Sanders sat out with minor reps after a reported practice clash. For Vegas odds makers, uncertainty equals lost handle, and for ownership, it translates into financial risk tied directly to coaching decisions. What this all reveals is that Stefanski's situation is no longer judged solely on wins and losses. The Shedeur Sanders factor has transformed the Browns into both a sports product and a media commodity, and any coach who fails to balance those dimensions is expendable. Stefanski may be respected for his play-calling history and steady presence, but right now the immediate headline is unmistakable. Altercations with Sanders have destabilized both the football side and the business side of the franchise, and with pressure mounting from ownership, fans, and media, the idea of the Browns firing their head coach mid-season is no longer hypothetical. It's a realistic option looming over every practice and every game. Losing those reps means Stefanski has no film to evaluate Sanders with the starters, and that alone raises serious red flags for the Browns right now. In the NFL, timing is everything, and quarterbacks live and die by how quickly they adapt to the speed of the pro game. By mid-September, most rookie QBs have at least 120 to 150 live reps against first-team defenses in preseason and early season action. Sanders, because of the pulled series and reduced exposure tied to practice altercations, sits at barely 80 meaningful reps with the starters. That gap isn't just a footnote, it's a massive developmental setback that could widen into an unbridgeable gulf if the situation lingers. Unlike veterans who can miss time and adjust, rookies need rhythm, and Stefanski's handling of these altercations has left Sanders at risk of falling behind the developmental curve that successful franchises demand. The ripple effects are visible on the depth chart and in how the offense has been constructed week to week. When Sanders has been on the field, his completion percentage hovers at 62%, a solid number for a rookie under heavy scrutiny. But when he's relegated to limited snaps or forced into inconsistent packages, the offense sputters. In one stretch against a divisional opponent, Cleveland's drives averaged just 18 yards before punting in the quarters when Sanders wasn't allowed to fully run the show. That inconsistency isn't just about Sanders adjusting, it's about the team not committing to him fully because of Stefanski's fractured relationship with the rookie. Coaches live on tape, and right now the tape shows an offense stuck in limbo, caught between development and damage control. The timing of this drama couldn't be worse for Cleveland's competitive outlook. The AFC North is as unforgiving as any division in football. Baltimore has Lamar Jackson healthy and averaging over 240 passing yards per game while still running for another 60. Cincinnati, with Joe Burrow, has gone from fringe playoff contender to perennial Super Bowl threat, routinely posting top 5 offensive efficiency numbers. Even Pittsburgh, despite its offensive limitations, consistently ranks top 10 in defensive efficiency and has the stability of Mike Tomlin on the sideline. The Browns, instead of capitalizing on Sanders' arrival to close the gap, are stuck in internal conflict that leaves them vulnerable. Playoff odds models that gave them a 47% chance of making the postseason before camp have already dipped closer to 33% after the altercations became public, according to several sports analytics simulations. That drop is staggering for September, when optimism should still be carrying the momentum of a new season. What amplifies the urgency is that Sanders isn't just another rookie. His presence has lifted the Browns into the national spotlight in ways not seen since LeBron James was drafted by the Cavaliers. ESPN's week-to-week programming noted Cleveland in 6 separate A-block discussions during August, a figure that hasn't happened for Browns coverage since 2018 when Baker Mayfield's debut stirred similar interest. Local sports radio ratings jumped 19% the week Sanders first took live snaps, and the team's social media followers across platforms grew by nearly 280,000 in a single month. That kind of cultural and economic weight puts every decision under a microscope. If Stefanski can't align with Sanders and keep him on the field, it risks not only wins but also the business surge that ownership is counting on. Fans have already made their stance clear. At First Energy Stadium, "We want Shedeur" chants erupted twice during preseason when he was pulled after short series. The organization sold out 2 of its first 3 home games, something that hasn't happened in Cleveland since 2019. But the secondary market shows the fragility. Tickets that were selling for $250 after Sanders' preseason debut dipped to $120 once whispers spread of a potential benching over practice conflicts. For a franchise that has long struggled to sustain sellouts, that seesaw effect reflects the direct tie between Sanders' presence and Stefanski's job security. When fans sense the coach is limiting their new star, the backlash is immediate, and it threatens to erode the fragile goodwill built since his arrival. The broader NFL context only magnifies the stakes. Networks pay premiums for quarterback-driven narratives, and Sanders is one of the league's most intriguing storylines. Cleveland's first nationally broadcast game with him active drew nearly 16 million viewers, almost double their average draw last season. Advertisers who paid for those slots expect Sanders front and center, not sidelined by altercations with a coach who seems out of step. If ownership sees that viewership and sponsorship value sliding because Stefanski can't handle the relationship, they'll have every incentive to make a move quickly. In modern football, coaches aren't just strategists, they're brand managers, and in this case, the brand is a rookie quarterback whose every throw carries more attention than any Brown in recent memory. Stefanski's supporters will argue that he's trying to instill discipline and structure, that a fiery rookie must be tempered to thrive long term. But that argument weakens when you consider the data. Sanders' QBR in games where he's given full control of drives stands at 61, a number comparable to rookie year performances of Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, both of whom became immediate stars. When Sanders' reps are curtailed, that number falls into the low 40s, closer to the struggles of failed projects like Dwayne Haskins or Josh Rosen. The evidence shows a clear correlation. When the team trusts Sanders, results improve. When Stefanski pulls back after altercations, the offense falters. That isn't a subjective narrative, it's measurable impact, and it underscores why this matters so much right now. For the Browns, the calculus is painfully simple. They can't afford to waste the Sanders window. Every rep he loses, every ticket they fail to sell, every broadcast that underperforms compared to projections chips away at the momentum they've finally built after decades of instability. The altercations with Stefanski aren't just a coaching issue. They're a franchise-wide crisis that touches development, revenue, fan trust, and playoff odds. And unless resolved quickly, it could define not just this season, but the trajectory of Sanders' career in Cleveland. Unlike Patrick Mahomes' rookie season in Kansas City, where Andy Reid controlled the narrative by letting him sit behind Alex Smith until week 17, Cleveland doesn't have the luxury of easing Shedeur Sanders in. Every snap, every altercation, and every sideline interaction is magnified. That's where Kevin Stefanski's situation feels eerily familiar to other coaching dramas, where a clash with a quarterback derailed careers. Take Josh McDaniels in Denver in 2009. He pushed Jay Cutler out after personality conflicts, and though he briefly held control, he never recovered as a head coach. Or consider Arizona, where Cliff Kingsbury's inconsistent management of Kyler Murray's fiery personality created headlines that never went away until ownership hit reset. The difference now is that Sanders isn't just a talented rookie, he's already proven to be a financial asset in a way few young players are. That tilts the balance even further away from Stefanski, whose success is measured more by his control over a locker room than by his win-loss record at this moment. The historical comparisons also highlight a sobering truth. When ownership has to choose between a coach and a quarterback with this much upside, it's almost always the coach who loses. Baker Mayfield's tenure in Cleveland provides a local example. After a record-setting rookie year, Mayfield clashed with multiple offensive coordinators and ultimately with then-head coach Freddie Kitchens. By the time the dust settled, Kitchens was gone after one season despite Mayfield showing regression. The message was clear. The quarterback, as the long-term investment, will always be prioritized over the coach viewed as replaceable. Stefanski, ironically, benefited from that cycle once. Now he could be the one caught on the wrong side of it. Numbers make the contrast even sharper. In 2020, Stefanski's first season, the Browns finished top 10 in rushing yards and had one of the league's most efficient play-action attacks, scoring on 65% of red zone trips. Fast forward to last season, and those figures had slipped. Red zone efficiency dropped to 49%, ranking 22nd in the NFL, and their play-action game produced just 6.8 yards per attempt compared to 8.9 during their playoff run. Those declines show a coach losing his tactical edge, just as the organization has gained a quarterback who demands a sharper system. For comparison, look at how Justin Herbert thrived under then Chargers offensive coordinator Shane Steichen in 2020. They built the system around him immediately, and Herbert responded with 4,336 passing yards and 31 touchdowns as a rookie. Sanders doesn't need to match those numbers right away, but if Stefanski isn't willing or able to tailor the offense to his strengths, the Browns risk repeating the mistakes of teams who let early tension stunt their investment. Even on the business side, parallels stand out. When Robert Griffin III took over in Washington in 2012, the franchise sold over 100,000 jerseys within his first 6 weeks, a figure that dwarfed their previous decade's combined totals for top sellers. Television ratings in the DC market spiked 40% for games he started, even as national coverage doubled. Yet behind the scenes, constant clashes between Griffin and head coach Mike Shanahan led to dysfunction that culminated in Shanahan's firing. The team couldn't afford to risk the financial boon Griffin represented, even if his play declined later due to injury. Cleveland is staring at a similar fork in the road with Sanders and Stefanski, though the stakes may be even higher given how quickly the rookie has turned the Browns into a top 10 merchandise seller across the league. Fans and analysts alike can also look at what happened in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy as a cautionary tale. By the late 2000s, tension between the two was palpable, with Rodgers openly frustrated by McCarthy's stale schemes. Despite McCarthy having delivered a Super Bowl earlier in his tenure, the Packers' ownership eventually sided with their quarterback, cutting ties in 2018 after a 4-7-1 start. Rodgers stayed, McCarthy left, and Green Bay immediately began a new chapter. Stefanski, who has just one playoff win on his resume, has far less goodwill built up than McCarthy did. If Cleveland feels that Sanders is their Rodgers-level franchise cornerstone, the writing may already be on the wall. From a statistical performance standpoint, Sanders' early flashes deserve a direct comparison. His 62% completion rate through his first reps may not seem staggering, but when you compare it to rookie debuts of high-profile passers, it's actually promising. Joe Burrow completed 65% of his passes before his injury-shortened rookie season, while Josh Allen sat at just 52% during his first year. Dak Prescott in 2016 shocked the league with 68%, but he had one of the best offensive lines and running games in football at the time. Sanders' production therefore aligns closer to quarterbacks who went on to successful careers, suggesting that if his growth is supported, Cleveland has the right player in place. Stefanski's inability to foster that support, highlighted by altercations and inconsistent usage, is why the comparison feels less about numbers and more about leadership gaps. Even more compelling are the market-driven contrasts. In Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts' ascension came with a direct correlation in ticket sales and broadcast prioritization. By his second season, Eagles' home games jumped from an average attendance of 65,000 to consistent sellouts nearing 70,000, while national networks flexed multiple games into primetime slots. Cleveland saw a similar initial surge with Sanders, but the volatility tied to Stefanski's management has threatened to undo it. When Sanders started, resale tickets touched $250. When rumors of internal strife spread, they dipped under $120. That kind of swing mirrors the boom and bust seen in Washington with Griffin, or even in Cleveland with Mayfield. Ownership knows these cycles, and knows that decisive moves often protect the long-term revenue base. The final comparison worth noting is intangible but critical: cultural trust. Successful franchises like Kansas City or Buffalo fostered environments where quarterbacks and coaches aligned seamlessly. Mahomes and Reed are the model. Allen and Sean McDermott, despite ups and downs, represent stability. In contrast, fractured relationships like Murray Kingsbury or Rodgers-McCarthy became soap operas that undercut winning. Cleveland now finds itself at that crossroads. Stefanski is respected but not irreplaceable, and Sanders has already shown he can be the gravitational force that resets a franchise. The question isn't whether ownership sees the pattern, it's whether they're willing to act before the tension defines the Browns' season, just as it did for so many other franchises caught between loyalty to a coach and commitment to a quarterback. Ticket resale markets collapsed once Sanders was rumored to be benched, and that's where the deeper context of this story comes into play. The Browns aren't just balancing football decisions, they're juggling millions in potential revenue, national brand exposure, and the fragile goodwill of a fan base that's endured decades of letdowns. Sanders' arrival injected new life into the franchise, and the numbers prove it. His jersey launch outsold every other Browns player combined, accounting for nearly 68% of team shop sales in his first month. On Fanatics, he cracked the league's top 5 bestsellers, joining household names like Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. That kind of retail explosion doesn't happen in Cleveland often, and ownership is well aware that Stefanski's strained relationship with Sanders puts those dollars at risk. The financial boost has extended into sponsorships and local partnerships. Several Northeast Ohio companies renewed or expanded their Browns sponsorship packages, specifically citing Sanders' marketability. One regional auto dealer reported a 12% increase in showroom traffic during the week Sanders' signing was announced, attributing it to crossover exposure from Browns promotions. That's not trivial. It shows how a quarterback can fuel local economic ripples, and it raises the stakes for every decision surrounding his playing time. If Stefanski can't harness that momentum, the franchise risks losing not just games, but the business wave tied directly to their rookie star. National networks have also recalibrated their Browns coverage. Before Sanders, Cleveland was scheduled for only one primetime game in the opening half of the season. After his preseason buzz, the league flexed an additional Sunday night slot and hinted at a possible Monday night adjustment later in the year. Nielsen data confirmed the gamble paid off. Cleveland's preseason finale drew 8.4 million viewers, more than double their average from 2023. By contrast, their 2022 preseason ratings hovered around 3.7 million, placing them in the bottom third of NFL teams. The Browns jumped into the top 10, yet when the Stefanski-Sanders altercations hit headlines, Cleveland's next broadcast dipped by nearly 2 million viewers compared to projections, the sharpest shortfall of any team that week. For television partners, those drops signal instability, and for ownership, they spell urgency. Inside the stadium, fan sentiment has swung wildly depending on Sanders' usage. Concessions data revealed a 14% increase in per capita spending during his preseason debut compared to typical August games. Merchandise kiosks ran out of Sanders jerseys and hats within the first half, but when word spread about practice conflicts and rumors of reduced reps, attendance softened, and food and beverage revenue fell back in line with 2022 averages. That may sound small, but for a franchise that has fought to squeeze every dollar out of its fan base, those fluctuations tell a clear story. The paying public sees Sanders as the product. If Stefanski disrupts that, even indirectly, he risks alienating the very fans who revived excitement in a stadium long associated with mediocrity. The gambling markets provide another layer of measurable impact. Sportsbooks reported that Browns-related bets surged by 38% in the week following Sanders' preseason breakout, with player props on his passing yards and touchdowns drawing heavy volume. But once the altercations leaked, that action evaporated. DraftKings noted a 41% decline in Browns prop bets compared to the prior week, one of the steepest drops across all NFL teams during that span. For the league, gambling volume is now a cornerstone revenue stream, and a team that destabilizes that market becomes a liability. Stefanski's clashes with Sanders aren't just internal disputes, they're triggers that reverberate into multi-million-dollar industries tied directly to the NFL's bottom line. Local media has reflected that same turbulence. The Cleveland Plain Dealer and major radio stations have shifted tone from cautiously optimistic to openly questioning Stefanski's future. In 1 week, mentions of job security tied to his name tripled across Cleveland's sports radio programming, while Sanders' name dominated call-in segments with overwhelming fan support. Nationally, outlets like ESPN and Fox have pivoted as well. Analysts who once praised Stefanski's calm demeanor now question whether his measured approach is a liability in handling a fiery rookie. This change in narrative is critical because perception drives coverage, and coverage drives ownership's tolerance for controversy. A coach perceived as out of sync with a generational rookie quickly becomes expendable. Social media sentiment underscores this divide. Monitoring tools show Sanders highlights on Instagram and TikTok generating upwards of 3.5 million views per clip, while team posts featuring Stefanski often struggle to crack 100,000. That imbalance isn't just about popularity, it's a reflection of where the brand equity lies. The Browns' digital footprint, once steady but unspectacular, has exploded thanks to Sanders. If Stefanski becomes perceived as the obstacle to maximizing that reach, the business case for keeping him weakens dramatically. Ownership knows full well that in today's NFL, brand metrics matter almost as much as wins and losses. Even beyond the numbers, there's a cultural element at play. Cleveland fans have been conditioned to expect disappointment, cycling through quarterbacks and coaches in endless rotation. Sanders represented a break from that cycle, a chance at long-term stability and relevance. Stefanski's inability to fully embrace that narrative not only jeopardizes his job, but also risks plunging fans back into cynicism. And once that trust is lost, even a playoff appearance may not repair it. The Browns, more than most franchises, cannot afford that regression in perception. What makes this context so damning is how intertwined the football and business sides have become. Stefanski isn't just judged on third down conversions or red zone play calling anymore. He's judged on TV ratings, jersey sales, fan engagement, and sportsbook activity, all metrics where Sanders is the central figure. And right now, every sign points to those numbers being threatened not by Sanders' performance, but by Stefanski's inability to manage him. In a league where ownership's patience is often dictated by financial health, the deeper context reveals a clear conclusion. Stefanski's seat isn't just hot, it's scorching, because he's standing in the way of the Browns' most valuable asset in decades. If the Browns stay the course and keep Stefanski through the season, the short-term picture looks complicated. Sanders' development will remain directly tied to a coach who has yet to prove he can manage both the player's personality and the organization's heightened expectations. That risks uneven growth. A rookie quarterback building flashes of promise, but never fully settling into rhythm. Analytics models show that quarterbacks who miss consistent first-team reps in their rookie year face a 29% lower chance of making a Pro Bowl by year 3 compared to those given uninterrupted starts. If Stefanski continues to reduce Sanders' workload after altercations, that trajectory may apply. The Browns could end up with a talented quarterback stunted by inconsistent trust, a scenario eerily reminiscent of how Baker Mayfield's early development plateaued amid constant coaching turnover and scheme changes. On the other hand, a midseason firing of Stefanski would create its own upheaval, but could also reset the tone. Interim options already on staff, such as offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, might bring a player-first approach, focusing solely on maximizing Sanders' strengths without the personality clashes. Historically, teams that make bold in-season coaching changes sometimes see immediate surges. The 2012 Ravens fired offensive coordinator Cam Cameron late in the year, pivoted to Jim Caldwell, and went on to win the Super Bowl. While the Browns aren't in that echelon, the lesson is clear. Decisive moves can stabilize locker rooms. Cleveland's ownership knows this, and given that Stefanski holds just a 26-27 record since his playoff run, his margin for error is razor thin. The playoff implications are equally stark. Current projections from 538 type models peg the Browns at around a 33% chance of reaching the postseason, largely because of uncertainty at quarterback. If Sanders were to play uninterrupted and the offense built around his skill set, that number rises closer to 44%. That 11% swing represents tens of millions in potential revenue from ticket sales, concessions, and primetime broadcast slots. Conversely, if altercations continue and Sanders' role remains limited, those odds could dip below 25%, essentially writing off the season before November. For a team with one of the NFL's highest payrolls, that outcome would be financially and reputationally disastrous. There's also the broader market perspective to consider. If Stefanski stays and the Browns flounder, they risk wasting Sanders' early marketing window. Historically, jersey sales and endorsement spikes peak within a quarterback's first 2 seasons before stabilizing. If Sanders' narrative turns from rising star to mired in controversy, the Browns could forfeit tens of millions in lost merchandise sales and reduced national spotlight. Compare that to the trajectory of Justin Herbert, who, despite playing for a non-marquee franchise in the Chargers, maintained national relevancy thanks to steady coaching alignment and uninterrupted playing time. Cleveland's margin for error is slimmer, and they can't afford to waste the rookie effect. Firing Stefanski mid-season, however, also carries risks. The Browns would join a short list of franchises making disruptive changes in September or October, a move often interpreted as panic. Stability has long been the elusive goal in Cleveland, and cutting ties with a coach in his 5th year could reinforce the image of dysfunction. Free agent coaches watching from afar may hesitate to take the job, knowing ownership's tolerance for turmoil is low. Yet, as history shows, winning cures everything. If an interim or eventual new hire can align with Sanders and produce results quickly, those perceptions shift overnight. The Browns' decision will be framed not by optics, but by the scoreboard and the box office. Looking ahead, the franchise faces a 3-pronged set of outcomes. 1. Stefanski stabilizes, reconciles with Sanders, and rides out the season to perhaps an 8-9 or 9-8 record, leaving ownership with a difficult offseason decision. 2. Stefanski is fired midseason, the team rallies behind Sanders, and the Browns claw into wildcard contention, giving ownership justification for a long-term coaching search. 3. The tension lingers, Sanders stagnates, and the Browns not only miss the playoffs, but also risk risk fracturing the most promising rookie quarterback investment they've ever made. Each scenario carries ripple effects in sponsorships, television coverage, and fan trust. The stakes go far beyond play calling. They could define the Browns' next decade. Nationally, the NFL itself is watching. Sanders' presence in Cleveland has been a broadcast boon, and league executives have no interest in seeing him mishandled. The league flexed a Browns game into primetime because of Sanders, and more could follow if stability returns. But if the rookie becomes a sideline storyline rather than a weekly highlight, the NFL's broadcast partners will shift elsewhere. That doesn't just hurt Cleveland, it hurts the league's overall rookie marketing push. Ownership is undoubtedly hearing that message behind closed doors, reinforcing why Stefanski's job security is under such direct threat. Ultimately, the future implications boil down to a balancing act. Sanders is the future, Stefanski is the present, and the two are colliding in real time. Ownership must decide whether salvaging this season with a coaching change outweighs the risks of further chaos, or if sticking with Stefanski in hopes of patching things up offers the better long-term play. Either path carries consequences for Sanders' growth, for playoff aspirations, and for the Browns' ability to shed the label of perpetual instability. Kevin Stefanski's situation in Cleveland underscores how thin the line is between stability and upheaval in today's NFL. On paper, he's a coach who once ended a 26-year playoff drought and restored some sense of order to a franchise long defined by chaos. But the arrival of Shedeur Sanders has rewritten the stakes. This isn't just about managing a roster or calling plays. It's about protecting the Browns' most valuable asset in decades, a rookie quarterback who drives ticket sales, ratings, and merchandise in ways Cleveland hasn't seen since LeBron James transformed the Cavaliers. When altercations between coach and quarterback become national storylines, the calculus changes. Ownership is no longer evaluating Stefanski solely on fourth down decisions, but on his ability to safeguard the brand and maximize a generational talent. The numbers tell a clear story. Sanders boosts viewership by millions, doubles secondary ticket prices, and outsells every jersey on the roster combined. Stefanski, by contrast, presides over an offense slipping statistically and a locker room leaking frustration. Those two trajectories cannot coexist for long. In the NFL, when tension builds between a coach and a quarterback with this kind of upside, history shows the quarterback wins. Whether the Browns act midseason or wait until year's end, the writing on the wall feels difficult to ignore. For Cleveland fans, the debate cuts to the heart of the franchise's identity. Do you prioritize loyalty to a coach who steadied the ship after years of turbulence, or do you gamble on maximizing Sanders' development at all costs? And if firing Stefanski is the move, does it represent bold leadership or another chapter in the Browns' endless cycle of dysfunction? What do you think? Should the Browns protect their investment in Shedeur Sanders by cutting ties with Kevin Stefanski now? Or does stability deserve one last chance to prove itself? And if ownership does make a change, who should be trusted to carry the franchise into its most important era in decades?